The studio lights blaze down on the pristine white interview set, their heat making beads of sweat form on the backs of necks despite the air conditioning running at full blast. It was the kind of sterile, corporate environment that Leonardo DiCaprio had grown to despise over his 3 decades in Hollywood, all surface shine with no soul beneath. "We're live in 30 seconds, called out the production assistant, a nervous young woman with a clipboard clutched to her chest like armor. The talk show host, Marcus Brennan, adjusted his tie for the 5th time in as many minutes, his perfectly veneered teeth gleaming under the studio lights as he practiced his $1,000,000 smile. Leo sat in the guest chair, his posture relaxed but his eyes distant, gazing past the cameras to somewhere only he could see. At 50, his face carried the weight of countless characters he'd inhabited, each role leaving its mark like sediment layers in geological time. The boyish charm that had launched him to stardom in Titanic had evolved into something deeper, more complex, the weathered visage of a man who had seen too much, both on screen and off. 10 seconds, the assistant announced, her voice cutting through the controlled chaos of the television studio. Marcus straightened his shoulders, his media-trained persona sliding into place like a well-fitted mask. This was supposed to be a routine interview, promote the new film, discuss the craft, maybe touch on some upcoming projects. Standard Hollywood fare. But as Leo's publicist had warned him that morning, there was always the possibility that Marcus would go for the jugular. Ratings were everything in this business, and controversy sold better than vanilla. "And we're live in 3, 2, 1. The red light flashed on, and Marcus Brennan transformed into America's favorite talk show host, his smile radiating warmth that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Good evening, America. I'm Marcus Brennan, and tonight we have a very special guest. He's one of the most celebrated actors of his generation, with a career spanning over 30 years and performances that have captivated audiences worldwide. Please welcome the incomparable Leonardo DiCaprio." The studio audience erupted in applause, their enthusiasm genuine despite being prompted by the warm-up comedian. Leo nodded politely, offering a slight smile that those who knew him well would recognize as his public face, pleasant but guarded. "Leo, thank you for being here tonight," Marcus began, settling into his chair with the confidence of a man who had conducted thousands of interviews. "Your new film, The Last Forest, has been generating incredible buzz. Can you tell us what drew you to this project?" Leo leaned forward slightly, his demeanor shifting as it always did when discussing work he was passionate about. "The script came to me at a time when I was questioning a lot of things about this industry, about storytelling in general. The story itself, about a documentary filmmaker who discovers that the Amazon rainforest he's been chronicling is actually a massive film set, it felt like a metaphor for everything I've been thinking about regarding authenticity in cinema." "Authenticity is certainly something you're known for," Marcus replied, his tone suggesting he was building towards something. "You're famous for your method approach, your dedication to research. I remember reading about how you learned to speak Russian for one role, lived with Inuit communities for another. That's what the work demands," Leo said simply. "If you're not willing to disappear into a character completely, then you're just playing dress-up. The audience can sense when you're phoning it in." Marcus nodded, his smile growing slightly sharper. "Speaking of dedication to the craft, I have to ask, and I know our viewers are curious about this, after all these years, all these incredible performances, how do you feel about the Academy's recognition of your work? You waited so long for that first Oscar win." Leo's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, a shadow crossing his features like a cloud passing over the sun. Anyone watching closely would have seen his jaw tighten, the slight narrowing of his eyes that indicated he was choosing his words very carefully. "Marcus," he said, his voice carrying a note of warning that the experienced host should have heeded, "I appreciate the question, but I think we should focus on the work itself." But Marcus Brennan hadn't become one of television's highest-paid hosts by backing down from potentially ratings-grabbing moments. He pressed forward with the persistence of a bloodhound who had caught a scent. "Oh, come on, Leo. Surely you can understand why people are fascinated by that journey. The years of nominations, the internet memes, the collective celebration when you finally won for The Revenant. It's become part of Hollywood folklore. Leo was quiet for a long moment, his gaze moving from Marcus to the cameras, then to the audience beyond. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that seemed to settle over the entire studio like a heavy blanket. "You want to know about awards?" he asked, his tone deceptively conversational. "You want to talk about trophies and recognition and all that Hollywood machinery?" Marcus sensed he might have pushed too far, but nodded anyway, committed to his course. Leo stood up slowly, the movement so unexpected that even the veteran camera operators were caught off guard. He walked to the edge of the stage, closer to the audience, his presence commanding attention without effort. "I'm going to tell you something, and I want everyone watching to really listen," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the hushed studio. "If all you're interested in is trophies, you'll never understand what real cinema is." The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the quiet hum of electronic equipment and the distant murmur of traffic outside the studio. "I've been in this business for over 30 years, Leo continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. "I've worked with masters like Scorsese, Tarantino, Inarritu. I've had the privilege of bringing characters to life that have stayed with me long after the cameras stopped rolling. And you know what? Not once, during the creation of those performances was I thinking about awards." He turned back to Marcus, who seemed to have shrunk slightly in his chair. "When I was preparing for The Revenant, sleeping in animal carcasses and eating raw bison liver, do you think I was imagining holding a golden statue? When I spent months learning to trade stocks and perfecting that Bronx accent for The Wolf of Wall Street, was I calculating my Oscar chances?" The audience was completely silent now, hanging on every word. The answer is no. "I was thinking about Hugh Glass, the real man who crawled across hundreds of miles of wilderness to survive. I was thinking about Jordan Belfort and the incredible human capacity for both ambition and destruction. I was thinking about the story, the truth we were trying to tell, the humanity we were trying to capture." Leo began pacing now, his energy building like a tide. "But somewhere along the way, we've turned cinema into a horse race. We've reduced the art of storytelling to a competition where the only thing that matters is who gets the prize at the end. And that mindset, that trophy mentality, is killing everything that makes this medium special." Marcus tried to interject, "But surely recognition from your peers." "Recognition?" Leo cut him off, his voice sharp now. "You want to know what real recognition looks like? It's the letter I got from a teacher in Montana who told me that showing What's Eating Gilbert Grape to her special needs students helped them feel seen and understood. It's the environmental scientist who credited Before the Flood with inspiring her career. It's the young filmmaker in Nigeria who watched Inception 15 times and decided to make movies because he realized that cinema could bend reality itself." The passion in his voice was infectious, and several audience members found themselves leaning forward, completely absorbed. "That's recognition. That's impact. That's what cinema is supposed to do, change people, challenge them, make them see the world differently. But instead, we've created this culture where the only success that matters is the kind that comes with a trophy and a speech." Leo stopped pacing and looked directly into the main camera, speaking not to the studio audience but to the millions watching at home. "I know there are young actors out there right now, talented, dedicated people who are choosing roles based on what might get them nominated rather than what moves them as artists. And that breaks my heart, because they're missing the entire point." He turned back to Marcus, who was clearly struggling to regain control of the interview. "You mentioned method acting, my research, my dedication. You know why I do all that? It's not for the critics or the Academy voters. It's because every character deserves to be portrayed with truth and respect. Every story deserves to be told with complete commitment. When you're up there on screen, representing a real person or a fictional creation, you owe it to them, and to the audience, to give everything you have." Leo's voice softened slightly, taking on an almost paternal tone. "I think about Daniel Day-Lewis, who retired from acting because he felt he had given everything he could to the craft. I think about actors like Philip Seymour Hoffman, who found truth in every role, no matter how small. These are artists who understood that the work itself is the reward. The studio remained completely silent, the usual restless energy of a live audience replaced by rapt attention. When I finally did win that Oscar for The Revenant, you know what I felt? Gratitude, yes. But also a kind of sadness, because I knew that people would focus on the award rather than the incredible journey of making that film. They'd talk about Leo finally winning instead of talking about the story of survival and the human spirit that we worked so hard to tell. Marcus, perhaps sensing that he was witnessing something special, abandoned his planned questions and simply asked, "So what would you want people to focus on instead?" Leo smiled for the first time since the interview began, and it was genuine, not the practiced media smile, but something real and warm. Focus on the stories. Focus on the characters. Focus on how cinema can transport you to places you've never been and show you lives you've never lived. When you watch The Departed, don't think about whether it won Best Picture. Think about the complexity of identity, about how we all wear masks, about the thin line between law and crime. When you watch Catch Me If You Can, don't calculate its award chances. Think about the longing for family, about the games we play to avoid facing ourselves. He paused, collecting his thoughts. That's what real cinema does. It doesn't win trophies, it wins hearts and minds. It doesn't collect awards, it collects moments of truth that stay with you long after you leave the theater. The audience began to applaud, slowly at first, then building to a standing ovation that seemed to surprise even Leo. He acknowledged it with a nod, then sat back down, his point made. Marcus, clearly moved despite himself, leaned forward. That's incredibly powerful, Leo. But I have to ask, don't awards serve a purpose in recognizing excellence? Don't they help bring attention to important films? Leo considered the question carefully. Awards can be useful, sure. They can bring attention to smaller films that might otherwise be overlooked. They can honor lifetime achievements and celebrate the collaborative nature of filmmaking. But when they become the primary focus, when they become the reason we make movies instead of the byproduct of making them well, that's when we lose our way. He gestured toward the audience. Every person out there has a story worth telling. Every human experience has value. But if we're only interested in the stories that might win awards, we're ignoring the vast majority of human experience. We're creating an artificial hierarchy where only certain types of films, certain types of stories, are considered worthy. So what's the solution? Marcus asked. We change the conversation, Leo said simply. Instead of asking actors about their Oscar hopes, ask them about their research process. Instead of speculating about award chances, talk about the themes and ideas in their films. Instead of focusing on the horse race, focus on the horses, the actual work being done. He leaned back in his chair, his energy shifting from passionate to contemplative. I've been incredibly fortunate in my career. I've worked with brilliant directors, talented co-stars, dedicated crews. I've had the opportunity to tell stories that matter to me, to shine light on issues I care about. If I never won another award for the rest of my life, I'd still consider myself the luckiest actor alive, because I get to do what I love in service of something larger than myself. The interview continued for another 20 minutes, but the tone had completely shifted. Marcus, perhaps recognizing that he had stumbled into something much more significant than a typical celebrity chat, asked thoughtful questions about craft, process, and the future of cinema. Leo responded with the same passion and intelligence that had marked his earlier impromptu speech. When the show ended and the cameras stopped rolling, the studio remained unusually quiet. The audience, rather than rushing for the exits as they typically did, lingered, discussing what they had just witnessed. Leo's publicist, a sharp-dressed woman named Sarah Chen who had been watching from the wings, approached him as he stood to leave. That was either career suicide or the most honest thing anyone said on television in years, she said. though her smile suggested she believed it was the latter. Leo shrugged. Maybe both. But I'm tired of pretending that the Emperor's clothes are beautiful when he's clearly naked. As they walked toward the exit, Sarah's phone began buzzing with calls from reporters, other publicists, and industry executives. The interview was already being clipped and shared on social media, with reactions ranging from admiration to bewilderment to anger. The studio heads aren't going to like this, Sarah warned. You basically just told the entire industry that their biggest night of the year is meaningless. I didn't say it was meaningless, Leo corrected. I said it wasn't the point. There's a difference. They emerged from the studio into the warm Los Angeles evening, the city sprawling before them in all its contradictory glory, beautiful and ugly, inspiring and corrupting, authentic and artificial. You know what the funny thing is? Leo said as they waited for his car. I genuinely love movies. I love everything about them, the collaboration, the creativity, the way they can capture truth in artificial circumstances. I just hate what we've done to the conversation around them. Sarah's phone buzzed again. She glanced at the screen and showed it to Leo. It was a text from a prominent film critic. DiCaprio just gave the most important interview about cinema in a decade. Leo smiled. Maybe some people get it after all. The car arrived, and as they drove through the city, Leo gazed out at the billboards advertising the latest blockbusters, each one promising spectacle and excitement. He thought about the young actors just starting their careers, about the stories that would never be told because they weren't considered award-worthy, about the audiences who deserved better than the manufactured drama of award season. His phone buzzed with a text from Martin Scorsese, saw the interview. Proud of you for saying what needed to be said. Another from Christopher Nolan, truth has a way of cutting through the noise. Well done. And one from a number he didn't recognize, I'm a film student at NYU. Your words tonight reminded me why I wanted to make movies in the first place. Thank you. As the car pulled up to his home in the Hollywood Hills, Leo reflected on the evening's events. He had no idea how the industry would react to his words, whether it would hurt his career or help it. But for the first time in years, he felt like he had said something that truly mattered. Inside his house, surrounded by books on environmental science, scripts from upcoming projects, and photographs from film sets around the world, Leo poured himself a glass of wine and settled into his favorite chair. He thought about the films he still wanted to make, the stories he still wanted to tell, the issues he still wanted to highlight. Tomorrow, the entertainment press would dissect every word of his interview. Industry executives would debate the implications. Social media would explode with opinions and hot takes. But tonight, in the quiet of his home, Leo DiCaprio felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time, the pure joy of having spoken his truth, regardless of the consequences. He raised his glass in a silent toast, not to awards or recognition or industry acclaim, but to real cinema, wherever it might be found. 6 months later, Leo found himself back on a soundstage, but this time it was different. Instead of the sterile environment of a talk show, he was on the set of a small independent film being shot in downtown Los Angeles. The movie, about a group of immigrants trying to make new lives in America, had a budget smaller than most Hollywood films spent on craft services. The director was Maya Rodriguez, the young actress who had walked away from her agent and her sure thing romantic comedy to tell her grandmother's story. She had financed the film through crowdfunding, grants, and her own savings, and had assembled a cast of largely unknown actors who believed in the project. Leo had heard about the film through a mutual friend and had offered to do a small cameo role for free. Not because it would help his career or get him awards attention, but because the script had moved him. Action. Maya called out, and Leo disappeared into his character, a small role as an immigration lawyer who helps the family navigate the legal system. There were no elaborate special effects, no stunts, no massive crew. Just actors telling a story worth telling. Between takes, Leo watched Maya work with her cast, seeing in her the same passion he had felt as a young actor. She wasn't thinking about awards or recognition or career advancement. She was thinking about her grandmother, about the universal experience of starting over in a strange place, about the stories that connected all human beings. "That's a wrap on Leo's scenes," Maya announced as the day ended. The small crew applauded, and Leo felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the pure joy of collaborative storytelling without any agenda beyond the story itself. As he prepared to leave, Maya approached him. "Thank you," she said simply. "Not just for doing this, but for that interview. It changed everything for me." Leo smiled. "It changed everything for me too." As he drove home through the city, Leo reflected on the past 6 months. His comments on that talk show had indeed had consequences, some positive, some negative. A few studio executives had distanced themselves from him, worried about his attitude problem. But other filmmakers, writers, and actors had reached out, wanting to collaborate on projects that prioritized story over strategy. His phone buzzed with a text from David Chen, the film student who had scrapped his thesis and started over. The new film, about his grandfather's experiences during the Cultural Revolution, had just been accepted into Sundance. Another text, from Robert Hayes, just finished principal photography on the Hospice film. "Most rewarding experience I've had in 20 years. And finally, one from Sam Parker, who had left his entertainment magazine job to start an independent publication focused on the craft of filmmaking rather than the business of it. Latest issue goes to print tomorrow. Thank you for reminding us what matters." Leo smiled as he pulled into his driveway. The interview had been a risk, a moment of complete honesty in an industry that often rewarded careful calculation. But it had done something he never expected. It had started a conversation that was changing how people thought about movies, success, and what it meant to be an artist. Inside his house, he poured himself a glass of wine and settled into his chair with a new script, not from a major studio or a famous director, but from a young writer in Detroit who had a story about factory workers that deserved to be told. As he read, Leo thought about real cinema and smiled. It was everywhere, waiting to be discovered by anyone brave enough to look beyond the trophies. Thank you for watching. I hope you all enjoy this video and learned a lesson. I would be grateful for your likes. Also don't forget to subscribe and comment on the video. See you soon.